We can be on Instagram, we can be on TikTok, we can use ChatGPT or even Google, Gmail.
This is our courts on the state and federal levels. They need to include more technologically literate folks.
Somewhere in the middle is probably where we're going to find a solution, right?
And that's a problem. And you know what? That's not just a problem with technology. That's also a problem with things like renewable energy. It's also a thing like with healthcare.
Welcome to the show, Professor Jasmine McNealy, University of Florida.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you.
So, Jasmine, is privacy like the tooth fairy, an ideal that we all want to believe in, but doesn't really exist?
Well, I would consider and define privacy as the right to be let alone, right? But there are contours and there's nuance to that. You can't always be let alone unless you move out into the wild, you kind of go off grid, and even sometimes you go off grid, you're going to encounter people, you're going to encounter regulations sometimes, you're going to encounter some kinds of things, but it's really about like participation, right? The ability to participate or to choose to participate or to choose not to participate in certain schemes and certain relationships and certain disclosures of information about oneself and about one's network, right? And that's an important thing as well. So is privacy a fairy tale, a myth? No, it's not a fairy tale or a myth. It's very important to how we live, how we are able to live, I should say, and about our own personal growth and functioning, the way we think, how we act or choose to act based on whether or not we believe or not just believe, whether or not we can possibly think and read and write and exist in certain ways. And I think that privacy has, in the past couple of decades, has had some challenges as innovations in technology have appeared, emerged, and the question remains, what does a person have the ability to choose? And again, it's a question about participation. And so I think when you think about like some of the data protection or privacy legislation that's proposed in the United States, not on the federal level, unfortunately, but at least on the state level in various cases, the question becomes like, how are we defining it? Like opt in or opt out. So if it's about opting into systems, that is, allowing people to choose to participate or not. If it's opt out, then it's more like we are automatically saying you have to participate, but you can, decide later to get out. And the unfortunate fact is because we only have so much bandwidth sometimes, we don't have the um wherewithal always, not everyone does at least, to decide to not participate or to remember not to participate in certain schemes. So, like, it is possible to have privacy and to live a private life, but it requires the policies, it requires the infrastructure, and it requires the wherewithal in combination to protect what it is that we think is private.
Is there a fallacy here, though? I mean, this option to opt in or opt out. I mean, any of us who download any app on our phones will agree to a 50-page disclosure, right, without reading it, because otherwise we can be on Instagram, we can be on TikTok, we can use ChatGPT or even Google, Gmail. So
Right.
the option of saying, "Hey, I'm going to keep my data private and away from the big corporations." I mean, yeah, I can do it, but the price to pay is non-participation in modern society. Would you not agree?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. That is why we need to have policymakers really in the United States, especially, really get into the arena of and start changing what is allowed with respect to business practices and the collection of data. Here's the thing, to run a social media site, to run a LLM, to run, various, kinds of organizations that are now in the digital market or the networked market space, they do not need to collect the enormous numbers of points of data that they collect. They do not need that, but they can, right? And so there are policymakers, too few, who have said, "Hey, you need to practice data minimalization." And that means you only need to collect what you need to collect to function or to allow the person to use your whatever, your platform. Unfortunately, those laws haven't passed, but we still need more of those. Why does an organization need to know so much about you? But the fact that they know that, the more that they know about you, the more they are able to attempt to personalize to get you to purchase something, to get your attention, to do all things that are profit making, right, for them. The question then becomes like, what kind of business models do we need to allow? We don't need to allow those. We don't need to allow. They've collected so much data, they don't even know what to do with all the data they collect. I've actually been in conversations with these people who represent organizations. They're like, yeah, we just collect the data. We don't know all what we're going to do with it yet. We don't have the algorithm to like, you know, circle through, circle through. I know, people who are gonna, the technologists that listen to your podcast will be like, it's not circling, whatever. We don't have the algorithm to actually process the data right now, but we're going to. We're going to develop it. We just don't know what we're going to do. Why do you need that data? It's not serving a business function currently, and even if it is, you don't need it, right? So this is what policy is supposed to be doing for us. It's really, I always say this when I'm having these policy and privacy conversations, and that is we put so much onus on the individual. Hey, you shouldn't use this app. You should read your privacy policy, the terms of service. And what is that going to do? Like you talked about not being able to participate in like some of the things. Like do you necessarily need to be on social media? Not really. But you know what? There are some advantages. Some benefits from participating in that way. Do you need to be on every platform for all different kinds of things? Not really. But you know what? Sometimes even government has done this. They have integrated these data collecting widgets and platforms into government sites, into utility sites, into news sites, so much that you can't avoid them sometimes, right? So, can you remove yourself? Like I talked about earlier, can you remove yourself from them? Absolutely. But you're missing so much of the things that are one, either required or could possibly be beneficial. But what if we changed how the businesses, the platforms could do business with respect to data collection? That's fundamentally why we need a power change. And the power change comes from policy. So we're waiting on government to do something. And some states have stepped in there. Some even I would say some cities or municipalities have stepped in to say, hey, you can't use this kind of technology, you can't process this kind of data. You have to give people the opportunity to delete information, those kinds of things. But until we get like a really like strong federal law in the United States, we are still at a disadvantage because this business model still exists.
Let me push back, which obviously that's why I'm here. Um, what if we don't want the government to get involved? We don't like the government. And hey, look, if consumers are okay with giving away all of their privacy in order to get the absolute best, most direct advertising or branded content to them, which they feel provides them with utility, isn't that a fair choice?
Yeah, so that's a straw man because they're not getting the best advertised. They're not getting the most personalized advertising. Actually, like studies have shown, like the personalization we get is not so that great, and it's not that effective. But you get it, and you have people questioning, like, "Hey, I just talked about shoes with my friend, and all of a sudden I got shoes on my social media feed. What is that?" Right? So that I mean, people are creeped out by that, for lack of more, specific terminology. People don't necessarily want that. They do, however, want access to purchasing. People will buy stuff online. We know that already. Make your Amazon, make your search function better so people can find the thing they're searching for. Google, get rid of that AI search and that people are annoyed by and give us really good go back to the OG algorithm you had that gave us really good search results. Like those things that they have moved away from that were great for the organization, go back to those things because they actually worked,
But
right?
can you
And
go
so
can you go back? I mean, now we're living in the age of AI. We have ChatGPT, we have Claude, we have Gemini, and now we have Chinese DeepSeek, and everybody's
yes.
warning us about TikTok and DeepSeek and the Chinese government stealing our data. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, listen, the real controversy about Chinese algorithms, so to speak, and Chinese AI is just like a layer of xenophobia because the Chinese companies and organizations are doing what American organizations are already doing. Full stop. That's it. American organizations are already collecting data on people, more data than people actually realize. They're already using it in systems. And those systems are collected connected to law enforcement and or government organizations. Full stop. So, if you're why are you like if we're being at all honest, many people are not okay with the government as you noted earlier having the kinds of data that social media collects. They're not okay with it, but some, unless you're in a state that says, "No, law enforcement, you have to get a warrant to collect this data." Some organizations already have that, and people don't know about it. So they're just thinking, "Oh, it's just sitting with Meta. It's just sitting with Google," if they're thinking about that at all. It's just sitting with Pinterest, maybe. I don't know. But add the Chinese factor, and it's like, "Oh, the Chinese. They're doing it for whatever purpose. They're scary. They're
Well,
they
yeah,
are
well, they are, companies like Tencent and Alibaba and Baidu,
Mhm.
there's much more government interference over there from the Chinese government.
So, I would say you're absolutely right. They have a different system over there in China. Um, and I would say that, again, let's not be fooled into thinking that social media in the United States from United States-based organizations are not in any way connected to law enforcement or government agencies. Let's dispense with that kind of mythology. Now, is do you want your necessarily do you want to be caught in the dragnet of Chinese data collection and processing and used for whatever purposes? Probably not. What I'm saying is, let's not believe that it's not happening already with US companies and organizations. And if we're going to create a law, then let's not create a law just for dealing with foreign actors. Create the law that deals with all actors who are collecting data and using it in these prediction ecosystems. That's my point of view. Now to just like point out the monster over there, that's a fear tactic. That's a scare tactic. The call is coming from inside the house with respect to privacy and data collection. And it has been for whatever we're in 2025, almost 20 years now. The call is from coming has been coming from inside the house. So that's my perspective. do we want to be participating in a grand foreign actor data collection scheme? No. And we're already participating in one in the US.
Well, you're talking a lot about regulators. Aren't regulators very much like academics, 20 years behind the real world? I mean, as AI is moving so quickly, and you said they don't need all the data. I actually understand that we need more data to train to do this reference training, right? Where they're coming up with synthetic data now. We have Reddit selling all the data going back 10 years because we need to train these models to become more intelligent. How much literacy do you think regulators have about AI and its implications on privacy?
Yeah, so a couple things. We don't need to train the LLMs. We need to choose better data for the LLMs and training them. And so the problem is from the beginning, we use data in various systems that um, are biased systems, but they've also chosen to create data sets from these spaces on the web, including on the web, that are inherently have bias baked into them. They're from specific kinds of audiences, specific kinds of people, specific kinds of language, even. And so that's the problem with LLMs. Do we need more data for them? Is that going to solve the problem? It could possibly help, but really it's about data and data choices. So, pointing to you as an academic, you know that how you collect data for research makes a key difference in how you're going to be able to interpret that data, what that data actually says to you. Same thing with artificial intelligence, including generative AI systems like LLMs. So, what are regulators behind? Absolutely, but they don't have to be. Do not have to be. And I'm not talking about them specifically needing to read. They do need to read more. What I am saying is that for the most part, regulators, policymakers, judges have staff. And this is the work of the staff advisors. Staff advise they need to include technologists or people literate in technology, including artificial intelligence, including media, including various things to help advise them so they don't look like they still have, old Nokia flip phones that they don't know what they're talking about. That is easily remedial kinds of things. Your staff needs to be up to date. Your staff needs to know how to brief you, to educate you as a policymaker. And this is not just our senators and, Congress people in general. This is our mayors, this is our governors, this is our courts on the state and federal levels. They need to include more technologically literate folks in their staff who are able to adequately and accurately brief them and advise them about what's happening with technology. And that's a problem. And you know what? That's not just a problem for technology. That's also a problem with things like renewable energy. It's also a thing like with healthcare. So, I mean, this is a structural issue that we're dealing with policymakers.
Yeah, and if we look back to the dot-com era, right, when the internet emerged, people were facing the same kind of dilemmas we're facing today. New technology, new opportunities, and none of us have the fair imagination to even consider what it may look like in 20 years, right?
So I think there are people who have um, ideas about what it may look like in 20 years, just because there are impacts that are replicable. What happens is usually, as you mentioned, the dot-com boom way back in the early aughts. Similar thing, like there are similar indicators with respect to artificial intelligence happening now, right? So what does that mean? That means like the people who remember or people who know about what happened back then need to be and some of them are sounding the alarm like, hey, we need to be paying attention to these specific indicators of what could possibly happen if there's no interventions. So are we placing our all on this one technology to solve or be a profit making vehicle, even though we know that there are some errors, not some, significant errors in various contexts. So what do we do with that? Do we just let it ride, to use gambling terms? Or do we intervene and make changes so either one, the technology and the systems and the organizations that use them are more responsible and or better possibly with respect to the technology, or do we just let it like we do the laissez-faire thing that we're used to doing in the United States, and we'll see what happens. Well, we know what could possibly happen, right? So I think that not just dot-com booms, we had similar things happen with deregulation as it touched, phone or, other utilities, including cable. Um, so we have a history, and we've seen, like, technologies that have boomed and bust or burst, in our history. We need to learn from those situations and, of course, pay attention and intervene when necessary.
Yep. And here comes the ultimate challenge in America and always, and I think you and I are on the opposites on this one. I'm going to trust the free market. You trust the government a little more. Somewhere in the middle is probably where we're going to find a solution, right?
So I don't know if I trust the government a little more. I just feel like the government needs to be doing its job. So like, what's the purpose of government? It is they're the functioning of government is to function so that in most general terms, society works, and it works in particular ways. And one of those ways is the regulation of certain activities, including business activities, and how it relates to people. So consumer protection, right? My idea is that, okay, if you are set up as a government and your function is to protect consumers, that includes protecting consumers from the possibilities of the free market. So free market is can be great, but it can also be harmful. And so who is supposed to step in to mitigate those harms? Government. The government is the best position to do so. Self-regulation, we've seen it with various other things, advertising, we've seen it with telecommunications and other technologies. We're not good at that. We're just not. Functionally in the United States, we're just not good at self-regulation. So we need a regulator. That's what the government is for. So
Jasmine, let's end this interesting conversation going back to the students. We're both educators. When it comes to expectations of privacy, assumptions about privacy, and even literacy of privacy,
mhm.
how do you assess this generation who grew up just, giving away privacy at 3 seconds for the latest app?
Yeah. So I think they're still concerned about privacy. I think it's different. I think students obviously know how to have 2 or 3 different Instagrams, right? One for your family and the other one for your close friends, and the other one for, like, the super close friends you show all the debauchery, right? And seriously, that's a demonstration of expectations with respect to the audience you have. It's about participation, right? The kind of participation you want to have and relationship, that you wanna have with certain people. That's privacy. It may not be, I'm I'm not gonna even use Instagram or TikTok or whatever. It is, I wanna use this, but I know I have to engage in certain behaviors to affirmatively attempt to at least protect the information I want to be kept secret. And so I think that this generation demonstrates that they do want certain things kept private. They do want certain things that only certain people can know or use. Um, and they only want to disclose certain things, right? And that includes using different language, includes um, codes and pictures, right? That only certain people can translate and understand. So I think they do. It's just different, and that needs to be, I guess, respected a little bit.
Yeah. Sounds great, Jasmine. Thanks so much for this fascinating conversation.
No problem. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. And we'll see you here next time on the Market of Influence show. Appreciate it.